He is 35 years old, but sleeps with the PlayStation on. He promised he would be different from the others, yet he keeps repeating the same patterns since he was 20. Some men grow old. Others merely let the years pass while refusing to grow up. They hide behind jokes, collect shallow adventures, and avoid commitments as if taking on responsibilities would cost them their soul. But deep down, they know they are stuck within themselves. The archetype is ancient, but never so visible. Carl Jung called it the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. He is restless, avoids routine, and is always seeking the next thrill. At first glance, he seems free, but look closely. That freedom is fragile. It comes at a high price. Relationships don't last. Goals don't hold up. Emptiness lurks at every new beginning. Today, culture encourages this gilded cage. Disposable relationships, endless distractions, promises of a life without obligations. The modern world embraces the man who refuses to mature. But growing up is not synonymous with giving up on life, quite the opposite. It's about learning to stay, to put down roots without suffocating yourself. And it is in this clash between eternal escape and the silent need to settle that the true story begins. There is something deeply seductive about the figure of the man who refuses to grow up. He is the friend who always proposes last-minute adventures, the partner who keeps the passion fresh at the beginning of every relationship, the colleague who never seems too worried about the future. His energy is contagious. He is creative, spontaneous, and seems to live in a constant state of open possibilities. For many, he represents a sort of antidote to the rigidity of adult life. But this charming image carries layers that are not always visible. Carl Jung described the Puer Aeternus archetype as one that rejects routine and longs for freedom above all else. At his core, the eternal boy is driven by an endless search for novelty. He feels suffocated by the idea of stability. Commitments, responsibilities, and limits seem to threaten his identity. That's why he prefers to keep doors slightly ajar, always ready to escape when life demands depth or surrender. This refusal to put down roots, however, does not come without consequences. It disguises itself as freedom, but gradually reveals its cost. Constant idealization prevents him from accepting the ordinary. He seeks the extraordinary, but gets frustrated when life inevitably offers simple, routine moments. That's when the charm turns into restlessness. When everything becomes familiar, he grows tired, changes jobs, cities, partners. Routine scares him as much as emptiness. The refusal to commit shows up in subtle ways in daily life. It may be the constant postponement of important decisions, the difficulty in maintaining stable relationships, or the deep fear of being seen as predictable. The man-child does not avoid these situations out of malice, but because he sees stability as a threat to his individuality. He believes becoming an adult is synonymous with losing his essence. But the truth is that the youthful, creative energy of the Puer Aeternus only reaches its full potential when it finds a solid container to express itself. While it remains loose, it becomes erratic. It's like a talented artist who never finishes his works. The initial charm fades and gives way to silent frustration. It's important to recognize, however, that this archetype also carries virtues. The ability to dream, the refusal to blindly submit to rules, and creative restlessness are qualities that move the world forward. Without the eternal boy, perhaps there would be no innovation or revolution. The problem is not in being pure, but in staying trapped in him. Deep down, the fascination with the eternal boy reveals a legitimate desire to keep the soul awake. The mistake happens when one believes that growing up means fading away. It does not. Maturity does not require sacrificing creativity, but rather integrating it. The real challenge is to find balance between freedom and responsibility. When the eternal boy is invited to look at himself without filters, he discovers that running away is not freedom, and that commitment is not imprisonment. It is at this point that the charm transforms into real power. The power of someone who not only dreams, but has the courage to make it happen. At first, he inspires admiration. He is the kind of person who refuses to be swallowed by the rigidity of the world. While so many have already accepted their grey routines, he insists on keeping the flame of spontaneity alive. This makes him magnetic. However, over time, something starts to feel off. Lightness gives way to avoidance. The easy smile hides restlessness, and what once seemed like freedom slowly reveals itself as a subtle form of imprisonment. The denial of maturity does not happen openly. It infiltrates through small gestures and daily choices, avoiding important calls, postponing decisions that require responsibility, making promises and not keeping them. The feeling that the world will always adjust to his pace creates the illusion that life can be controlled effortlessly, but this doesn't last. Eventually, everyday life makes its demands. Bills pile up, relationships wear thin, and opportunities vanish. And he, still clinging to the idea that growing up means losing, finds himself surrounded by consequences he can no longer ignore. This refusal to accept reality becomes even more evident in personal relationships. In love, the pattern repeats. At first, there is intensity and passion. He gives himself completely, making the other person feel unique and special. But as soon as the relationship requires consistency, real presence, and emotional maturity, he pulls away. Small crises arise. Complaints about monotony, searches for freedom, silences that didn't exist before. This is fear showing itself. The fear that depth will suffocate him, that the ordinary will destroy the fantasy. And so, silently, he begins to self-sabotage. It may be through emotional betrayals, subtle distancing, or veiled criticism. Instead of confronting discomfort, he prefers to destroy what he built. When his partner demands more than he is willing to offer, the exit becomes inevitable. He leaves, justifying that the relationship lost its magic. But deep down, it's the same old story. Running away feels safer than facing his own resistance. This same logic repeats in other areas. In his career, he rarely stays in the same place for long. He changes jobs when challenges become repetitive. He starts projects with enthusiasm but rarely finishes them. He blames the environment, others, or the system, without realizing that the real battle is internal. He cannot stand the idea of being limited, even though these very limitations are what create a foundation for something lasting. This constant running comes at a high cost. Little by little, feelings of frustration and emptiness emerge. He begins to realize that, although surrounded by new experiences, nothing endures. Friendships become shallow, loves fade, and the feeling of always starting over haunts him. The world, once full of possibilities, now feels repetitive and meaningless. The refusal to accept rules and responsibilities, which once seemed like a healthy act of rebellion, now appears childish. He finds himself reacting like a teenager, always defensive, always seeking someone to blame for his stagnation. The fear of facing his own vulnerability turns into pride and denial. And it is exactly at this point that the dark side of the eternal boy reveals itself most strongly. He becomes a prisoner of himself, trapped between the desire for freedom and the need to put down roots. He lives in limbo. He no longer belongs to the world of free dreamers, but he has also not built a solid space in the real world. This internal tension generates silent suffering. He starts to feel out of place, misunderstood, and often enters deep existential crises. The most tragic part is that the more he runs, the more he feeds the cycle. The illusion that the next experience, the next love, or the next project will bring fulfillment keeps him in constant motion, but without direction. He confuses movement with progress, when in reality he is merely avoiding the true confrontation, facing himself. However, behind this denial lies the seed of transformation. It is precisely in recognizing the dark side that the possibility of integration is born. Running is easy. Staying takes courage, and only those who are willing to face their own immaturity can finally take the first step toward authentic maturity. Behind the refusal to grow up lies a deep and often invisible connection: the relationship with the mother. In Carl Jung's symbolic universe, this figure goes beyond the biological role. She becomes a powerful archetype, capable of both nurturing and imprisoning. When we talk about the eternal boy, it is not uncommon to find the subtle yet decisive presence of what Jung called the devouring mother. This symbolic mother is not necessarily the real figure who raised the individual. She represents absolute comfort, extreme protection, and the denial of the world's pains and challenges. For the man who resists maturity, this presence offers a silent promise. Here you are safe. Here nothing is required of you except your existence. Within this archetypal bubble, growing up becomes an act of betrayal. Leaving means abandoning security and facing the unpredictability of adult life. The influence of this mother goes beyond the family environment. It manifests in the choice of partners and in how relationships unfold. Many men who embody the Puer Aeternus unconsciously seek maternal figures in those they become involved with. They look for care, unconditional acceptance, and the promise that they will not need to change. At first, this may work, but over time, the idealization becomes burdensome. The partner, initially placed on a pedestal, starts to become a threat when they demand reciprocity and responsibility. At that moment, the symbiotic relationship breaks down. The eternal boy feels betrayed, as he expected the other to fulfill all his needs without asking for anything in return. What was once love turns into escape. He distances himself, closes off, or leaves, repeating the pattern of avoiding any situation that forces him to mature. This dynamic repeats in cycles. Choosing partners who play the role of mother is an unconscious way of keeping alive the illusion that it is possible to remain in a state of eternal childhood. But this choice comes at a price. Relationships based on need rather than mature exchange tend to wear out quickly. The partner, tired of being seen more as a caretaker than a companion, pulls away, and the eternal boy, once again, finds himself alone, reaffirming his belief that the world is incapable of understanding him. Beyond romantic relationships, this influence also extends to other areas. The refusal to face challenges, the fear of failure, and the dependence on external validation are traits born from this symbolic bond with the archetypal mother. She represents, in her dark form, the denial of the world in its imperfection. Within her, there is no effort, no pain, no frustration, but there is also no growth. Breaking away from this figure is not easy. It implies a symbolic mourning, where the eternal boy must accept that completeness will not come from another's absolute care. It is necessary to face life as it is, imperfect, demanding, full of ups and downs. In this acceptance begins the true journey toward maturity. Integrating the mother figure means understanding that care and comfort have their place, but living fully requires autonomy. It requires bearing frustration without running away. It means abandoning the search for constant nurturing and accepting that the world is not here to fulfill childish desires. When this shift happens, the eternal boy stops seeking mothers in his partners, friends, or the world. He begins to find within himself the ability to sustain himself. The mother archetype ceases to be a prison and becomes a resource. And in this silent transition, the man finally takes a decisive step toward the adult he was always meant to become. At some point, running away stops being an unconscious choice and turns into a burden. When the same patterns repeat, when relationships lose their magic, and emptiness becomes more present than the excitement of novelty, something begins to collapse. It is the breakdown of the disguise. The eternal boy faces the reality he always tried to avoid. No matter where he runs, the call to grow up catches up with him. And when that call becomes impossible to ignore, the crisis emerges. It is not uncommon for this moment to be accompanied by painful events. A significant loss, the end of an important relationship, or the failure of a seemingly promising project. Life, ruthless and fair at the same time, forces the confrontation. It is in this moment that many face the symbolic mourning of the idealized boy. That image of someone who could live without restrictions, always free and desired, begins to crumble. This process, though difficult, is deeply necessary. Accepting that growing up requires letting go of certain illusions is the first step toward true transformation. It's not about stifling creativity or killing the youthful spirit, but about integrating it. The energy of the eternal boy doesn't need to disappear. It needs to find a new way to exist, more grounded, more responsible, and, precisely because of that, more powerful. Individuation, a central concept in Jung's work, becomes essential here. It is the journey of becoming who you truly are, not who you imagine yourself to be. This requires brutal honesty. It means looking at your wounds, admitting fears, and accepting that adult life is made not only of achievements but also frustrations. Maturing is, in part, the art of enduring discomfort without running away. For many, this process begins with small actions. Taking on simple commitments, staying in relationships even on hard days, accepting routines that once seemed intolerable. Each gesture like this is a brick laid in the construction of a more solid self. There are no grand heroic gestures. Maturity is silent. It reveals itself in daily choices, in promises kept, in patience when facing challenges. In this new stage, the eternal boy is not denied, but redefined. He is no longer the absolute guide, but becomes an internal advisor. His creativity is welcome, but now meets healthy limits. The desire for freedom still exists, but is balanced by the understanding that true freedom is born from responsibility. Those who run all the time are always chained to fear. Those who stay become free because they learn to deal with what is. Another fundamental step is revising relationships. Stop seeking disguised mothers in partners or friends, and start relating in a mature and equal way. Accept that loving also means caring, sustaining, and often giving up personal comfort for the sake of the other. Relational maturity is one of the clearest signs that the eternal boy has begun to integrate. Finally, it's important to understand that the journey to maturity has no definitive end. It is made of comings and goings. There will be days when the urge to drop everything and return to careless lightness will knock on the door. And that's okay. Real growth is not linear. It is full of setbacks, but also meaningful advances. When the eternal boy transforms into an adult without killing the inner child, a unique strength is born. It is the power to dream with your feet on the ground, to desire the extraordinary without despising the ordinary, to create, love, and live with depth. This is the true act of courage, and it is what separates those who merely grow older from those who truly grow up. Growing up is not something that happens simply with the passage of time. It is a choice, a deeply transformative decision. The eternal boy within each of us does not disappear with age. He remains there, whispering promises of freedom and ease. However, when we allow him to guide all our steps, life loses its depth. We become hostages to immediate desires and a relentless search for experiences that, sooner or later, fade. Embracing maturity means accepting the weight of choices, enduring the repetitions of everyday life, and sustaining relationships when they move from passion into the realm of building. It means understanding that freedom is not the absence of ties, but the ability to stay, even when it's hard. This does not mean suffocating the inner child. On the contrary, it means integrating it, giving it space, but not letting it take control. It is possible to live with both lightness and responsibility, to dream and to achieve, to love and to care, to be spontaneous without being reckless. The challenge of growing up is eternal. At every stage of life, the invitation to redress will be lurking, but so will the chance to move forward, to take ownership of your destiny with awareness and purpose. If you enjoyed this content and want to dive deeper into life's questions, subscribe to the channel and share this video with others who are also among the awakened.